Hello friends, let us now learn about one more topic, which is cornea. So what do you see in cornea? So there are some one-liners. The refractive index of cornea is 1.376 and refractory power of cornea is 43 diopters. Thickness of cornea. If you see the thickness of cornea, centrally the cornea is 450 to 500 microns, whereas if you see peripherally the cornea is 700 to 900 microns, which is important. Then coming to the structure of cornea, if you see anterior surface, vertically the vertical diameter of anterior surface is 11 millimeters and the horizontal diameter of anterior surface is 11.7 millimeters. Vertical diameter of anterior surface is 11 millimeters and the horizontal diameter of anterior surface is 11.7 millimeters, whereas posterior surface is circular, so it has only one diameter and that diameter is 11.7 centimeters. Now if we see the layers of cornea, in the cornea we have, this is the endothelium. Okay, this endothelium is the metabolically active layer of hexagonal cells. Then we have, after endothelium we have Descemet's membrane. Then after Descemet's membrane we have the Duas layer. This Duas layer is actually the sixth layer, or called as Duas layer is present. It is actually the toughest layer. Dua is the name of the Indian scientist who has discovered it. Then we have endothelium, Descemet's membrane, then we have Duas layer, then we have stroma, which is the thickest part is the stroma. Then we have Bowman's capsule. Then there is epithelium, which has stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. So cornea contains endothelium, Descemet's membrane, stroma, Bowman's membrane and epithelium. So first, if you see cornea is nothing but anterior 1/3 of the eyeball is called as cornea. It has the first refracting surface is present in cornea. It is the first refracting surface is cornea. Then it is transparent also. If you see anteriorly it is less curved, and posteriorly it is more curved. This is one thing which you have to remember. Anteriorly it is less curved and posteriorly it is more curved. So the thickness of the cornea is mainly diagnosed by the central thickness of cornea is diagnosed by pachymetry. The thickness of the cornea is detected by pachymetry. It is almost, central thickness is 555 microns, whereas the whole thickness in the periphery will be 600 microns. Now if you see here, vertical diameter is a little more when compared to horizontal diameter in the cornea. That is, vertical diameter is 11.7 millimeters, whereas horizontal diameter is 11 millimeters in cornea. As I have already said, there is epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, followed by Bowman's membrane. Then we have stroma, then we have Descemet's membrane and endothelium. What about the transparency of cornea? If you see about the transparency of cornea, in this, cornea is bathed in precorneal tear film. This precorneal tear film will supply oxygen to the cornea and thus make it transparent. Okay, the precorneal tear film will supply oxygen to the cornea and thus make the cornea transparent. And a state of dehydration will also make the cornea transparent. Then cornea also has a stroma. In the stroma, if you see, the collagen fibers are arranged parallelly, separated by 1 or 2 wavelength of light. So stroma has collagen fibers which are arranged in parallel arrays, each separated by half the wavelength of light. So that is stroma. Because of this collagen fibers in the stroma also, the cornea is transparent. Avascularity contributes to corneal transparency. Other factors like no myelinated nerve fiber and presence of hexagonal cells packed with sodium, potassium, ATPase in endothelium will also contribute to transparency of cornea. Then if we see the physiology of cornea, so physiology of cornea, as I have already said, there is, cornea is avascular, dehydration, it has anaerobic metabolism, nutrition, it acquires nutrition by the aqueous humor. This is humor, not human. It acquires nutrition by the aqueous humor. Okay, it has anaerobic metabolism. And why is cornea transparent? I have already told you why cornea is transparent. It is because of the stromal fibers. It is due to sodium potassium pump, dehydration, right? So all the factors which we have already dealt with, all those are responsible for transparency of cornea. Then if we see epithelium, epithelium is actually replaced by limbus stem cells. Okay, then what is important in cornea is the endothelial cells. Endothelial cells are very important in cornea. If you see in adults, there are 2500 to 3000 endothelial cells per millimeter square, whereas in children we have 3500 to 5500 endothelial cells per millimeter square are present in children. Then if you see epithelial damage, if endothelial damage occurs, if in any case if there is endothelial damage, the adjacent cell changes its shape and thus it takes care of the damaged cells. So that is called as polymorphism. What is polymorphism? If an endothelial cell damages, then the cell which is surrounding to it will change the shape of the cell in such a way that it can accommodate to the loss of the endothelial cell. Okay, so that is called as polymorphism. We also called as this, in this polymorphism, there what occurs is pleomegathism will occur. That is, there will be the enlargement of nearby cell, the adjacent cell becomes enlarged. See, if one endothelial cell is damaged, the cell beside it starts to enlarge and it forms and it changes its shape. That is called as polymorphism. During this process, there is pleomegathism occurs. Pleomegathism is increase in enlargement of cells is called as pleomegathism will occur. Then if you see what is the limit of this formation of this polymorphism. So for the polymorphism or for compensation, if there are less than 500 cells per millimeter cube, then there won't be any compensation possible. If the cells are less than 500 cells per millimeter cube, then no compensation is possible. Okay, no compensation is possible if there are less than 500 cells per millimeter cube. This will lead to corneal edema. So here we have stromal edema. This stromal edema leads to epithelial edema. This epithelial edema will finally leads to bullous keratopathy. Initially there will be stromal edema which leads to epithelial edema which forms bullous keratopathy. So you have bullous edema here. This is the stromal edema. Okay, what is bullous keratopathy? Bullous keratopathy is extreme form of hydration due to the loss of endothelial cell. Bullous keratopathy is extreme form of hydration which occurs due to the loss of endothelial cell is called as bullous keratopathy, right? Next, what is the most metabolically, if we will see some one-liners, what is the most metabolically active layer? Most metabolically active layer is endothelium. Then in all the layers, among all the layers which we have seen, which of the following is involved in bullous keratopathy? In bullous keratopathy, mainly the epithelium is the layer which is involved in bullous keratopathy. Then in contact lens users, there is one more situation. See, whenever the person uses contact lens, in contact lens wearers, there is decreased oxygen supply. Because there is decreased oxygen supply, the glucose utilization is hampered. Now because this glucose utilization is hampered, this will lead to the breach. So glucose utilization is hampered. So this is one thing which you can, so because of this predisposes to corneal ulcers. Okay, what is an ulcer? Ulcer is breach in the epithelium is called as ulcer. Then there are some organisms which can also penetrate the intact epithelium. Some organisms can even penetrate the intact epithelium. What are they? The organisms like gonorrhea, diphtheria, haemophila and listeria can penetrate even the intact epithelium. Okay, organisms which can penetrate the intact epithelium include gonorrhea, diphtheria, haemophila and listeria can even penetrate the intact epithelium. Then what are the investigations which are done in cornea, cornea pertaining to cornea? We have something called as keratometry. Keratometry measures the curvature of the central cornea. Keratometry is used for measuring the curvature of central cornea. Then we have corneal topography. This corneal topography is used to measure the curvature of whole cornea. See, for measuring of only central corneal curvature, we can use keratometry. For measuring the curvature of whole cornea, we should use corneal topography. Then we have this stain called as fluorescence stain. This fluorescence stain is mainly for epithelial defects. Fluorescence stain is mainly done for epithelial defects, whereas rose Bengal stain is mainly done for degenerated epithelial cells. Rose Bengal stain mainly stains degenerated epithelial cells, but rose Bengal stain is rarely used, but we generally use fluorescence stain. So this is the this is the fluorescence stain which is used, and this is the rose Bengal stain which highlights the areas of desiccation and keratinization. Okay, next I'll even zoom it. Yeah, so here you can see this is fluorescence stain. What is this? This is nothing but fluorescence stain, where you can see grain colored stain which is showing the corneal infiltrate. Here you can see corneal aberration and even conjunctival lesion is seen. And we have the next stain which is rose Bengal stain. So this is rose Bengal stain, in which you can run it. Yeah, in this you can see these filaments are seen by rose Bengal stain, and here all this is the stained portion in rose Bengal stain, all this inferior staining. Okay, so this is rose Bengal stain which is staining the desiccation and keratinization. Okay, then if you see next we have something called as pachymetry. Why is this pachymetry used? This pachymetry is used for mainly measuring the corneal thickness. This corneal thickness is measured at limbus. If it is measured at limbus, it is 1 millimeter. At the center, if you see, the corneal thickness is 0.5 to 0.6 millimeters. So in pachymetry is mainly for measuring corneal thickness. At the limbus, the corneal thickness is 1 millimeter. At the center, the corneal thickness is 0.5 to 0.6 millimeters. Okay, then for measuring corneal thickness, we also have one more, which is corneal thickness is done. Now we have specular microscopy. Why is specular microscopy used? It is for measuring the endothelial cells. For examination of endothelial cells, we can use this specular microscopy. Then we have something called as aesthesiometer. So what does this aesthesiometer do? This aesthesiometer will measure the corneal sensation. For measurement of corneal sensation, we can use this aesthesiometer. Okay, then we have something called as microbiological examination. In microbiological examination, we have, it is done for staining we can do, and we can also do culture of microbiological examination. Okay, then for evaluating the layers of cornea, we have a microscope which is called as confocal microscopy. This is done to evaluate all the layers of cornea. For evaluating all the layers of cornea, we have confocal microscopy. Okay, so these are the instruments which are used for identifying or for for corneal examination. So if you see, this is the cornea, the junction of cornea and conjunctiva, there is limbus. So what do you see in limbus? In limbus, this is the conjunctiva and this is the cornea. At the limbus, we have two things. The limbus can be combined with the cornea. So this limbus is anterior limbal border. So this is the limbus, this hole is the limbus. So we have, in the limbus we have two things. One, we have this hole is the limbus, right? In this we have anterior limbal border and we have posterior limbal border. In between the anterior and posterior limbal border, we have mid limbal border. Okay, between the anterior limbal border and mid limbal border, we have this blue zone. Whereas between mid limbal border and posterior limbal border, we have this white zone. So this is important. So here what is actually important is this anterior limbal border, mid limbal border and posterior limbal border are seen in limbus. Okay, then between the anterior and mid limbal border, we have this zone which is called as blue zone. Whereas between the mid limbal border and the posterior limbal border, we have this zone which is called as white zone. Okay, so these are the things which you see at the limbus, right? Next. So any incision if you give between anterior limbal border and mid limbal border is a corneal incision, and it induces astigmatism, right? If you give, this is very important, see, if you give any incision between the anterior and mid limbal border, it is a corneal incision, and thus it will can cause astigmatism and D-strip. It can cause astigmatism, or it can also cause the D-strip. Okay, so we should not give the incision between anterior limbal border and mid limbal border. That is one. Then if you give any incision between mid limbal border and inferior limbal border, or sorry, mid limbal border and posterior limbal border, if you give any incision between mid and posterior limbal border, then it might pierce the trabecular meshwork, thus leading to glaucoma. It can also cause iris prolapse and injury also. So because of this side effect, we should not give the incision between mid limbal border and posterior limbal border. So always you should give the incision, the ideal point for giving incision is mainly mid limbal border. The anterior limbal border and mid limbal border you should not give incision, because that might cause astigmatism due to corneal injury, whereas between the mid limbal border and posterior limbal border you should not give incision, because this will again lead to penetration or piercing of trabecular meshwork, and thus it might cause glaucoma. So you should not give any incision between them. Then once we have learnt about the normal general features, now let us learn about the clinical conditions of cornea. So first clinical condition is ectatic conditions of cornea. In this, first important is keratoconus. This keratoconus is mainly a non-inflammatory. It is non-inflammatory lesion which is seen bilateral in 80% of the patients. It actually starts in the puberty and then it progresses slowly. So if you see pathology, here there is progressive thinning of retina, thinning of cornea, where it becomes 420 to 380 micrometers. It becomes 420 or 318 micrometers. Here there is progressive thinning of cornea and there is ectasia of cornea. Why is there this thinning? This thinning is mainly due to the defective synthesis of mucopolysaccharidosis and collagen tissue. Because of defective synthesis of mucopolysaccharidosis and collagen tissue, this can cause progressive thickening and ectasia of cornea. So if you see the developmental theories, so in the developmental theories which are available for this keratoconus mainly include, we have keratoconus is actually a developmental condition. It is a degenerative condition. It can be hereditary. It can cause hereditary dystrophy. Then it can cause endocrine anomaly also. Next, what are the symptoms of this keratoconus? This keratoconus will lead to progressive myopia. It will lead to progressive myopia and it will lead to irregular astigmatism, which will progress to defective vision. In the beginning, it will have progressive myopia and irregular astigmatism, which will progress to defective vision. Okay, then if you see the classifications of keratoconus, we have the classification. Keratoconus is of three types. One, we have nipple cone type. Second, we have oval cone type. Third, we have globus cone type. In nipple cone type, the cone is small in size, less than 5 millimeters in with steep curvature, whereas oval cone is larger with 5 to 6 centimeters and ellipsoid curvature. Then we have globus cone is very large, that is globe like. Okay, that is more than 6 millimeters. Then we have something called as Windows reflex. What are the signs of corneal ectasia, which is keratoconus? The signs are, first we have Windows reflex is distorted. I'll show you the pictures of everything, just a minute. If you do Placido disc examination, see, the signs mainly include, first, window reflex is distorted. Okay, then if you see Placido disc examination will reveal irregularities of circles are seen. Then if you do slit lamp examination, on doing slit lamp examination, you see thinning and ectasia of the cornea, and you will also see opacity present at apex. What you actually see, which is very important, is Fleischer's ring, which is seen at the base of the cone. You see Fleischer's ring seen at the base of the cone, and there is also folds which are seen in the Descemet's membrane and Bowman's membrane with the help of this slit lamp. So with the help of slit lamp examination, there is Fleischer ring which occurs at the base of the cone, and this also causes folds in the Descemet's membrane and Bowman's capsule. Here in slit lamp examination, very fine vertical deep stromal striae which are called as walked lines are also seen. All these will disappear on external pressure on the globe. Walked lines are very fine vertical deep stromal striae are called as walked line, which are also seen in slit lamp examination. So slit lamp examination, we see opacity at apex, Fleischer ring at base of cornea, at the base of cone. You see folds in the Descemet's membrane and the Bowman's membrane. You see very fine vertical stromal striae which are called as walked line are seen, which will disappear on external pressure. Then on retinoscopy, if you do retinoscopy, on retinoscopy you see a reflex called as yawning reflex or scissor reflex is seen on retinoscopy. Okay, you also see high oblique or irregular astigmatism is seen in retinoscopy. Then we have, if you do a distant direct ophthalmoscopy, this is distant direct ophthalmoscopy. In this you can see annular dark shadow is seen with on distant direct ophthalmoscopy. This annular dark shadow will separate the central and peripheral areas of cornea, thus causing oil droplet reflex. See, on distant direct ophthalmoscopy there is annular dark shadow which occurs, which separates the central and peripheral areas of cornea, causing oil drop reflex, oil droplet reflex. Then if you see the other signs, one more sign which is present here is we have something called as Munson's sign. This Munson's sign is the localized bulging of the lower lid. Okay, localized bulging of lower lid is called as Munson's sign. Then if you do keratometry for cornea, you will find it to be 45 diopters. In average keratometric values are 45 diopters. Then if you do it for this keratoconus, the severity of keratoconus is divided into three types. It can be mild, where the refractive power will be, keratometry values will be less than 48 diopters in mild. In moderate, there will be the keratometric values will be 48 to 54 diopters. In severe, the keratometric values will be more than 54 diopters. Okay, that is the keratometry. The keratometric values will tell us the severity of keratoconus also. Then we have something called as corneal topography. What do you see in the corneal topography? The corneal topography is done in order to study the shape of the cornea. In order to study the shape of corneal surface, we can do this corneal topography. Then there is something called as Form-Frucht. Form-Frucht is actually the earliest subclinical form of keratoconus which is detected, is called as Form-Frucht. Form-Frucht is earliest subclinical form of keratoconus detected. So we will see these reflexes once again. So first, window reflex is distorted. So here window reflex is distorted. We have Placido disc examination. You see irregularities seen in the Placido disc. Okay, so on slit lamp examination, we see Fleischer's ring at the base and folds of the Descemet and Bowman's membrane are seen, and you also see vertical deep stromal stria which are called as walked lines are seen. On retinoscopy, you see yawning reflex or scissoring reflex is seen on retinoscopy. If you see on distant direct ophthalmoscopy, you see annular dark shadow which will separate the central and peripheral areas, thus resulting in oil droplet reflex. I will show you the pictures also. See, in this we have oil droplet sign and scissoring sign. So if you actually see this sign which you are seeing is scissoring sign. Anyways, this is oil droplet sign, where there is this is the central part of retina, this is the peripheral part of retina. See, this is the central part and this is the peripheral part. So here there is separation of central and peripheral part of retina is seen, that is called as oil droplet sign, right? So if you see, this is the oil droplet reflex, where this is the central part of retina and the peripheral part of retina are separated. Then what are walked striae? Walked striae are the vertical lines which you see. So if you clearly observe this, I'll just zoom in also. These vertical lines, see, these vertical lines which you see on cornea are called as walked striae. Okay, then we have this ring which you are seeing here is Fletcher's ring. Okay, then here you can see the thinning of the cornea. Okay, and this is the Munson sign, that is when you try to downward gaze the downward gaze, you can see the ectasia of the cornea. See, this ectasia of the cornea is keratoconus, which is Munson sign. So this is Munson sign, where there is localized bulging on the lower lid. Okay, so this is the Placido disc. Normally it should look like this, but in keratoconus, because of irregularity, you see irregular Placido disc sign. Okay, so this is about the keratoconus main important things. Okay, here one more important thing is form frost is the subclinical form of keratoconus detected. Then the same thing of the oil drop reflex, Fletcher ring, deposition of iron, and Munson sign. It is the same thing which I have drawn with diagrams. Then what about the diagnosis? Diagnosis is you will have to do topography, and in the topography, if you do topography, then what is topography? Wavelength of light is projected onto the cornea. So this cornea, based on the areas, okay, flatter areas or sharper areas, thinner, thicker, based on that we will plot a graph. Okay, and if the cornea is thinner, this is called as red spot. Okay, we will do this topographic scan for knowing the corneal irregularities. Then we have, that is for corneal irregularities. Fine. Then what about the investigation of choice? Investigation of choice for this keratoconus is, we have something called as orb scan or pentacam is available for investigation of choice for posterior keratoconus. Okay, this is also called as orb scan or pentascan, or also called as Placido scheme flag, or also called as Placido scheme flag. This we will see both anterior and posterior cornea is seen hypothetically and it is reconstructed. Okay, this is for posterior keratoconus, which is orb scan or pentacam. Then if you see, the associations are very important, but before going to associations, we will see the complications. Complications are, this will lead to the rupture of the Descemet's membrane. Okay, because of ectasia, because it is thin cornea, so there can be rupture in the Descemet's membrane. Whenever there is rupture in the Descemet's membrane, it produces acute eye drops due to sudden development of corneal edema, and it forms acute eye drops. This will lead to the defective vision, pain, photophobia, and lacrimation. Then how are you going to treat this keratoconus? For treatment, we should do surgical correction. You can use contact lens, that is, you can use rigid gas permeable contact lens, which are specially designed for scleral contact lens. Specially designed are scleral contact lens, or which are rigid gas permeable contact lens. Okay, this will cause collagen corneal cross linking. You can also use corneal collagen cross linking or riboflavin plus UV rays. So this will decrease the lesion. Disease can be decreased by using corneal collagen cross linking and riboflavin and UV rays. Then we have something called as keratoplasty. What is this keratoplasty? This keratoplasty is mainly, we can also do keratoplasty, which is deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty, or penetrating keratoplasty can also be done. Then what about the associations? The associations, which are the things which are associated with this keratoconus, can be divided into two types. There are some ocular conditions associated with keratoconus, and there are some systemic conditions associated with keratoconus. So ocular conditions associated with keratoconus include ectopia lentis, congenital cataract, aniridia, retinitis pigmentosa, vernal keratoconjunctivitis, whereas systemic conditions like Marfan syndrome, atopy, Down syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, osteogenesis imperfecta, and mitral valve prolapse. So all these are the systemic conditions which are associated with keratoconus. What are they? Marfan syndrome, atopy, Down syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, osteogenesis imperfecta, and mitral valve prolapse are associated with keratoconus. Then after keratoconus, the next disorder which is important is we have keratoglobus. This keratoglobus is actually a familial condition. What is this keratoglobus? It is hereditary bilateral congenital disorder. Here there is thinning and hemispherical protrusion of entire cornea, not just a small part of cornea, but the entire cornea undergoes protrusion occurs. So that is keratoglobus. This is non-progressive and inherited disorder with autosomal recessive trait. Okay, then we also have keratoconus posterior. What is this keratoconus posterior? Here this is a non-progressive condition and it is rare condition. It is non-progressive and rare condition where there is light cone like bulging of posterior surface of the cornea. So here there is bulging of posterior surface of cornea is seen in keratoconus posterior. Then okay, that is about keratoconus. Then after that, the next disorder here is about Wernicke's keratopathy, or also called as cornea varticellata. So what is this cornea varticellata or vortex keratopathy? Here what usually happens here is, here there is golden brown gray opacities which are seen in the epithelium and it is usually bilateral. Okay, what are the drugs associated with it? The drugs associated with it are chloroquine toxicity or hydroxychloroquine toxicity. Whenever there is chloroquine toxicity, it is a non-dose dependent and non-duration dependent lesion, and thus this can be this is decreased on removal, and this chloroquine also causes something called as bull's eye maculopathy in retina. Then it can also cause amiodarone toxicity, is dose dependent duration dependent toxicity which is decreased on removal of the drug. It can cause vertex keratopathy. Then Fabry's disease, which is alpha galactosidase A enzyme deficiency, also can cause vortex disease. Then drugs like phenothiazide and indomethacin are associated with vortex keratopathy. So drugs associated with vortex keratopathy are chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, amiodarone, Fabry's disease, phenothiazine and indomethacin. So let me just show you the picture of vortex keratopathy. So if you see, these are the golden brown or grayish opacities which you can see. If you clearly see it, these opacities which are going like this. If you see here, we have these opacities. This is even more clearer. These opacities which we are talking about, these are called as vortex keratopathy. Okay, next we have something called as, the next disorder is photoophthalmia or photokeratitis. So what is photoophthalmia or photokeratosis? So in this there is occurrence of multiple erosions are seen. And why is these multiple erosions occurring? These are mainly occurring due to the UV rays, that is 311 to 290 microns. So these UV rays are causing the multiple erosions of cornea, causing photoophthalmos or photokeratitis. So what are the etiological features? It is associated with bright light of short circuit. It is associated with naked arc light exposure and snow blindness because of reflected UV rays. So what is the pathophysiology? If you see pathophysiology, there are UV rays. These UV rays within 4 to 5 hours, they will cause desquamation of corneal epithelium. Once the corneal epithelium is desquamated, it leads to multiple epithelial erosions. Now because of these erosions, there will be severe burning pain, lacrimation, photophobia, blepharospasm is seen. What is important here is fluorescein dye will stain these multiple epithelial erosions, can be drained can be stained by fluorescent angiography, right? Then after that you will have to use cycloplegics for the treatment. You can use patching, and you can use antibiotics also for the treatment. You can use NSAIDs for pain relief. But what is prophylaxis is? Prophylaxis is we can use something called as Kruger's glass. This Kruger's glass will cut off all ultraviolet and infrared rays which are used by welding workers. So welding workers should use this Kruger's glass which will cut off all UV light, that is ultraviolet and infrared light. Then let us learn a small few points about corneal surgery. So in the corneal surgery, first we have the first type of corneal surgery is called as keratoplasty, or we also call as corneal grafting, or it is also called as corneal transplantation. Keratoplasty or corneal grafting or corneal transplantation. The most common organ which is transplanted is the cornea. So what is the cornea? What is the indication? Indication of corneal transplantation is any visually deprived cornea having good visual protection or visual potential can be used for corneal transplantation, can be is the indication of corneal transplantation. So in the corneal transplantation we have something called as autokeratoplasty. So what does this autokeratoplasty mean? So in autokeratoplasty we have two types of autokeratoplasty. One, we have rotational autokeratoplasty. Second, we have contralateral autokeratoplasty. What is autokeratoplasty? Keratoplasty is transplantation of cornea. Auto is self transplantation of cornea. That means in this the patient's own cornea is taken and that cornea is transferred to the area with pupillary defect. So if you see in rotational cornea, we will take patient's own cornea, trephinated and rotated, and this is transferred to the pupillary area with small corneal opacity to the periphery. Okay, there will be corneal opacity but that is present for the periphery, but you will mainly give the vision to the pupillary area. So you can trephinate the own cornea and you can transfer it to the pupillary area, that is rotational. Then we have contralateral. In contralateral, the cornea of one eye is exchanged with the other. So what are the indications of contralateral corneal transplantation? They are if the one eye is opaque and the other eye is blind due to posterior segment disease is the main indication. See, if one eye is opaque, whereas if the cornea of one eye is opaque, so that cornea should be transplanted, and the other eye is blind due to posterior segment disease. So in that case we can do autokeratoplasty. Then there is something called as allografting or allokeratoplasty. So what is this allokeratoplasty? In this, as the name says, we will transfer the diseased cornea is replaced by donor's cornea. In this we use donor's cornea and we will transplant the diseased cornea with donor's healthy cornea. So this allokeratoplasty is of two types, first type and second type. In the first type, this is called as penetrating keratoplasty, where we take full thickness grafting is taken. Second, we have lamellar keratoplasty, where we take partial thickness grafting is taken in lamellar keratoplasty. In first, which is penetrating keratoplasty, we take full thickness grafting, whereas for lamellar keratoplasty we take and partial thickness grafting is taken. Even in lamellar keratoplasty we can divide it into two types, where we have deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. As the name says, we take deep and anterior lamellae, that is anterior part is taken. Okay, this is done when endothelium and Descemet's membrane are normal. So example, keratoconus. For keratoconus, endothelium and Descemet's membrane is normal. So only we will need the deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty is done for this type of keratoplasty. Okay, for keratoconus, where the endothelium and Descemet's membrane is normal. We also have one more type, which is Descemet stripping endothelial keratoplasty. In this Descemet stripping endothelial keratoplasty, it is done only and only if endothelium is defective. In endothelium is defective, like in surgical trauma, during phacoemulsification, there is a chance that endothelium might get damaged. So whenever there is damage to the endothelium, then we can use this Decimet stripping endothelial keratoplasty. We can also use small patch graft. Let me show you pictures for these both. So if you see, this is the picture, and this first one shows penetrating keratoplasty. So what is penetrating keratoplasty? It is full thickness grafting. So here this is full thickness grafting involving the epithelial layer, Bowman's membrane, stroma, Decimet's membrane, and the endothelium. Then the next one is anterior lamellar keratoplasty. In this we only remove the, that means we only use the epithelium, Bowman's membrane, and the stroma for transplantation, whereas endothelium and Decimet's membrane are left, because here endothelium and Decimet's membrane are normal for these patients. So this is mainly done for keratoconus. Okay, then if you see the next, which is Decimet stripping automated endothelial keratoplasty. In this, as the name says, Decimet stripping. So here we will remove mainly the endothelium and Decimet's membrane, whereas the other upper layers like epithelium, Bowman's membrane, and stroma is left intact, and only the posterior part is transplanted. Okay, so that is Decimet stripping endothelial keratoplasty. Now, what are the indications of this keratoplasty? So indications are, we have optical indications, which are done for improving vision. These include corneal opacity, bullous keratopathy, corneal dystrophy, and advanced keratoconus are seen. So these are corneal opacity, bullous keratopathy, corneal dystrophy, or advanced keratoconus. For this, undergoing this surgery is the only option available. Then it can be therapeutic indication also. In therapeutic indication, it is done to replace the inflamed cornea. It is done to replace the inflamed cornea. Then there is tectonic graft. So in order to restore the integrity of eyeball, especially in corneal perforation or marked corneal thinning, along with tectonic graft, we can also use this corneal transplantation. Then it can be done for cosmetic issues. Okay, then if you see donor tissue, the donor tissue, the prerequisites for donor tissue include the person, the specular count should be more than 1500 per millimeter cube. The prerequisite is the specular count, that is the, what is specular count? Specular count is the measurement of endothelial cells through specular microscopy. Okay, the count should be more than 1500 per millimeter cube, and the person is free of diseases like AIDS, hepatitis B, syphilis, and malignancy. Okay, so this is for the donor tissue. Then if you see, the donor tissue should be removed 7 hours after death. This donor tissue should be removed less than 7 hours after death, and it is stored in sterile condition. Okay, and then we will have to do a bi-microscopic examination of the whole globe is done before processing the tissue for media storage. So first you will have to, the donor eye should be removed less than 6 hours of death, and then the eye is stored in a sterile container. Okay, then you will have to do bi-microscopic examination of the whole globe should be done before processing the tissue for media storage. If it is corneal tissue, is again it is graded. The corneal tissue is graded according to the the amount, that the type of the tissue has excellent, very good, good, or fair. Then once you have found out the corneal tissue, you have got the corneal tissue. Now you will have to see the methods of preservation of corneal tissue. Now corneal tissue can be preserved by the following methods. One, we have short term preservation of that is short term storage of corneal transplant or corneal graft. Mainly includes, here the globe is put at 4 degrees Celsius in moist chamber, which includes the short term storage. Then we have intermediate storage for up to 2 weeks. In intermediate storage, we can use two things. One, we can use McCarry Kaufman medium, We can use McCurry-Kaufman medium, or you can use chondroitin sulfate enriched medium. So these are used for intermediate storage. For intermediate storage, we can use McCurry-Kaufman medium, or chondroitin sulfate enriched medium can be used for intermediate storage. Then you can also use Optisol medium, K-sol medium, or Dexasol medium. Media like Optisol medium, K-sol medium, and Dexasol medium can also be used. Then what about the long term storage? Long term storage is up to 35 days. In this you should do either organ preservation or organ culture method can be done, or you can do cryopreservation. So in long term storage you can either do organ culture method or cryopreservation is done for long term storage. So these are the three storages which are available. Short term storage, that is up to 48 hours, where globe is stored at 4 degrees Celsius in moist chamber. Intermediate storage is up to 2 weeks, where we use McCurry and Kaufman medium, and chondroitin sulfate enriched media is used like Optisol media, K-sol and Dexasol media. Then we have long term storage which is up to 35 days, where we can do organ culture method or cryopreservation can be done. So these are the different methods for corneal preservation. Then now let us now learn some important points about the surgical technique of keratoplasty. See, we don't need to know the perfect surgical procedure of this keratoplasty, but just remember that the donor cornea which is cut is cut larger than recipient cornea. So donor cornea is cut 0.25 millimeters larger than recipient cornea. So donor cornea is cut 0.25 centimeters larger than recipient cornea, and after cutting the donor cornea you will place it in Teflon block. Okay, you will cut the donor cornea and then you will place it in Teflon block. Okay, now the button is cut with trephine from the endothelial side. Then we can do excision of recipient corneal button is also done. So if you see in the excision of the recipient corneal button, in this with the corneal trephine, partial thickness incision is made in the host cornea, and anterior chamber is entered with razor blade and excised through corneoscleral scissors. Okay, we don't need to know the details, but anyways, what is important next is about the complications of corneal transplantation. The complications can be, we have early complications and late complications. In the early complications we have flat anterior chamber. Early complications include flat anterior chamber, there is iris prolapse, infection, secondary glaucoma, and epithelial defect, and primary graft failure. Early complications include flat anterior chamber, iris prolapse, infection, secondary glaucoma, we have epithelial defects, and primary graft failure are seen, which are early complications. In late complications we have graft rejection, recurrence of the disease, and astigmatism are seen in late complications. Then we can have graft rejection. So what happens in graft rejection? In graft rejection is an immunological response of donor host. It is immunological response of host to the donor corneal tissue. The response of host to donor corneal tissue is called as graft rejection. So what happens in graft rejection? This graft rejection can occur as early as 2 weeks. It can occur from 2 weeks to several years. It might take several years to occur. In this graft rejection, there is delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction. It can be associated with delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction, and this is called as graft rejection. Okay, then after graft rejection, now we will see what are the risk factors of graft rejection in a patient. The risk factors of graft rejection in a patient include when the patient is younger age of recipient, or previous history of graft failure, corneal vascularization, large graft size, donor epithelium, or massive blood transfusion. Risk factors of graft rejection include younger age of recipient, previous graft failure, corneal vascularization, large sized graft, or if there is donor epithelium or massive blood transfusions. These are the main risk factors of graft rejection. Now, whenever there is graft rejection, what is seen clinically? So if you see clinically, you will see epithelial rejection. In clinically, you will mainly see these things. That is one, epithelial rejection which stains with fluorescein. Then you see subepithelial infiltrates, which are nothing but Kai's dots are seen. And we have stromal rejection. In stromal rejection, you see sudden onset of full thickness stromal hairs are seen. So these are seen clinically. That is epithelial rejection which stains fluorescent stain. There can be subepithelial infiltrates which shows K's dots. There can be stromal rejection where there is sudden onset of full thickness stromal haze is seen. Then how are you going to treat it? Treatment of this rejection is by we give IV. For this patient we give IV methylprednisolone is given, and endothelial line. In endothelial rejection we have something called as Codadust line. This Codadust line will demarcate the healthy and damaged epithelium. What does this Codadust line do? This will demarcate the healthy and damaged epithelium. Then we have diffuse endothelial rejection with lots of keratic precipitates are also seen. The most common infection of this graft rejection is Staphylococcal epidermidis. So let me show you the pictures for these clinical features. Just a minute. So this is the picture which is showing the Codadust line. So where is this Codadust line? So this is the Codadust line, which is nothing but the graft rejection, and we also have Kayer's dots. So these are the Kayer's dots which you can see. These are punctate epithelial opacities. Okay, so this is about corneal rejection. So thank you guys for watching my lecture. In the next class we will learn some more lesions of cornea. Thank you.